So I'm not sure if I would, necessarily hug a person like she described, but the idea that the person is maybe asking for help not because they want a fix, but just because they want to be heard. Um, if you think about it like that, then other people's self-disclosure might not mean that it's time to reciprocate. It might just mean they just want to be heard. They want to be not told what to do. I think that might be where Dr. Laura went wrong, is she tried to tell the person what to do and the person was never following her directions. Maybe instead, just hear, just listen, just say, that must have been tough, or, man, that must have been scary, or, appropriate words that have to do with whatever they've disclosed. And then don't feel like you have to say anything next time. This wasn't about reciprocation. This was about somebody unloading their angst or whatever. So that's my tip. I'm clearly not a radio shrink, but that would be my tip. Now, there are some differences by gender. We find that on average, females disclose more about themselves, especially to other females, than males tend to do. But there's a little caveat. Males never disclose quite as much as females do, but when they do disclose things about themselves, they tend to do it to females, either friends or their mom or their sister or something. A lot of times self-disclosure that is between two males can be a little bit threatening because it may make the discloser feel like they are now appearing weak in front of their male peer. And so they may not want to disclose to a male, and they may not feel like a female is going to judge them in that way. And so when they do disclose, they tend to disclose more to females than to males. Differences by culture. Individualistic cultures disclose way more, members of individualistic cultures disclose way more information, especially to people who aren't that close to them, than collectivistic cultures do. And you can kind of imagine why, if you think about collectivism being about maintaining social harmony and not bringing shame to your group, gossiping or sharing embarrassing things or that kind of thing, that could really rock the boat. That could make other people upset. And so in a collectivistic culture, we tend to not disclose as much, especially to people who we don't know well. Even within the family, though, self-disclosure may be lower in collectivistic cultures than in individualistic cultures. I'm pretty sure that most collectivistic cultures don't have phrases like venting. Venting is a word that we use to express like just getting it off your chest. There's no solution. No, it's not going to get fixed, but I just feel better by having talked about it. We don't see that kind of getting it off your chest just to feel better in collectivistic cultures as often as we see it in individualistic cultures. Now, talking about intimate communication, we're talking about in relationships. So I'm not talking about talking to strangers on the bus or something anymore. I'm now talking about in an intimate relationship, how the two sexes communicate with each other, or communicate differently. So typically women, when they're having a conversation, will look at each other. Getting tea, getting a drink, something like that. Having your crochet meeting or whatever thing you're doing, oftentimes involves sitting in a circle or sitting in a way that you're facing each other and then talking and looking at each other. And part of the conversation involves judging each other's nonverbal cues from their face or their body language, things like that. Men, when they have, conversations with a peer, oftentimes they're not looking at each other. They tend to share more when they can't look each other in the eye than when they can. So on average, men are more side by side in their intimate relationships with their same-sex friends, and women are more face to face on average. When it's cross-sex, now the female style is more likely, and males are more likely to open up, like I said before, to females than they are to other males. And so it could be a romantic relationship, or it could just be a friendship, or even a coworker. Oftentimes men will open up more to a female than to other men. Now, when we have cross-sex interactions between males and females, for example, it's really important for the two sexes to know that there are different ways that information is conveyed. If a woman really wants to get information from a man, like how he feels or what he's worried about or things like that, it might be best done in the dark, for example, like sitting around a campfire, or while the two of you are doing something. So you're not really looking at each other. You're sort of, you're moving rocks to make a wall and you're sort of just talking. He may be more willing to reveal things in that context than he would if you sit down and demand eye contact. So for difficult conversations, it might be best to not have them face to face if it's a male-female conversation and the male is the one who needs to share something. So just little tricks for how to get, and this works not just for romantic relationships, but moms and their sons oftentimes will have difficulty communicating. Oftentimes moms will be like, oh, he tells me a lot of things, but I didn't know that about him. Well, a lot of times you find those things out in these kinds of side-by-side conversations, or we're busy doing something else. I used to sit down and play Mech Assault with my son when he was little, and then while we'd play, we'd talk about things, and things that he wouldn't normally talk about, he would talk about when we're both staring at the screen and trying to play a game. So just little things that could make it a little bit easier for men to reveal their viewpoints or their thoughts and emotions and stuff like that. All right, let's talk a little bit about, sorry, my firefighter husband just got back from a call, so dog had to announce his arrival. So the balance of power. Powerful people tend to be the less interested party in a conversation. If I have the power, I don't need to care that much about what you're communicating, right? I can just sort of go with my agenda because I'm the powerful person. The powerful person also tends to be the one who is over benefited in a relationship. So if you kind of reflect on a relationship that you might have, be it a friend or a coworker or a romantic partner, and think about who on average is getting more out of the relationship. If you realize that maybe you're having an unequitable relationship, the one who's getting more is the one who has more power in the relationship. So when you're more powerful in a relationship, that means that oftentimes you can more easily walk away. It might mean that you can more easily manipulate the less powerful member in the relationship. People with less power will typically do a lot of nagging. That's a way to tell if you don't have much power in this situation. Now, we might have more power in one situation within the relationship and less power in the other, right? I mean, a lot of times, I find myself nagging to get somebody else to take out the garbage because I don't have a lot of power about that. And, I think to a certain extent, I think I told you guys before that my daughter and I arbitrarily made the rule that you had to have a Y chromosome to take out the garbage. And it's possible that the people with the Y chromosomes disagree with this rule. And so I find myself nagging sometimes, like, why isn't anybody taking out this garbage? Nobody has said to me, why don't you take it out? My husband and son are nice enough that they've never said, why don't you take it out? But the fact that I'm nagging shows that I don't really have the power to make them do it. Like they'll do it when they feel like it. Honestly, I don't have power in that situation. But there are other aspects of the household where clearly I have the power because they're nagging me, right? So it changes back and forth, and I'm just as immune to nagging as they are, right? You nag me about it, and I'm kind of like, well, I'll get to it when I want to. So you can tell you're powerless if you're doing a lot of nagging. So that when I read that, I was like, wait a second. I do a lot of, hold on. I didn't like that. So the powerless person nags. So yeah. How about commitment and relationship satisfaction? How do we maintain satisfaction in a relationship that involves commitment, like let's say marriage or where you're assuming it's going to be a lifelong commitment? One of the best ways to maintain satisfaction is to maintain positive illusions about the relationship. Now that sounds wrong, but when recalling things, you go ahead and make it easier to recall good things. Or if you tell yourself that this relationship is, maybe even more satisfying than your crabby mood might imply, right? those are actually good for the relationship. And a person who maintains positive illusions about the relationship oftentimes finds that those illusions start to actually become reality, because when we are more positive about the relationship, our partner tends to become more positive about the relationship. So it actually can be really good. Misperceiving the past, I kind of started to mention that a second ago, the idea that when in doubt, when you're recalling things from the past, remember it positively. Remember the good parts about it. Remember the intention, maybe not how it actually ended up working out. We have this really funny story in our family about, so when I got married very young, and so we couldn't afford any kind of decent jewelry or anything. So I had this little 1/5 of a carat carbon occlusion filled little diamond solitaire. And then it was with a teeny tiny little wedding band that when I was waitressing after I got married, people would ask me, "Oh, I see you're engaged. When are you getting married?" Because it was all like so microscopic, it was all really small. And I wore that for the first 13 years of my marriage. We added a wedding band that was wider to help make it look like more. So I stopped getting asked when I was going to get married, at least. But anyway, so after my grandfather died, he left me this ring that my uncle had made that had a diamond in it. I could see that there was a diamond in it, but it was this big gold nugget style man's ring, and the diamond was like recessed inside of it. So I didn't realize how big that diamond was or anything. I didn't know anything about it. So my husband took that diamond and had it placed into like a solitaire type ring, and then presented it to me. And this is one of these examples of how he favorably misperceives the past, because I was quite, I'll just say it, a jackass in my response when he gave me this ring. Because I'm like, I open the box, I see what is, I don't know, 4 times, 5 times larger than the diamond that I currently have on my hand. And all I could think was, we can't afford this. Like, what is this? I thought he had gone out and bought me a ring. And so I'm like, is this cubic zirconia? And he's all, no, it's not cubic zirconia. And I go, well, we can't afford this. What is this? And I was so ungrateful. I was like, I'm saying it with a smile on my face right now, but I was like ready to cry, because how much did he spend on this? I was so upset about it. And he kind of was like, well, I mean, if you don't want it. And then he finally explained it to me that it was, my inherited diamond. And I was like, wait, this was under all that nugget? That is unbelievable. But once he explained it to me, I was like, okay, I can accept this gift because it didn't just bankrupt us. Okay. But I was just such a jerk about it. I was like mad at him for getting it. And he tells the story much nicer. In his story, isn't it sweet that I was concerned about the cost? And isn't it adorable that I thought he would get me a cubic zirconia? He completely misremembers what a jerk I was. My sister-in-law was there and she can attest. I was a jerk about it. I mean, I was. And so that ability to, reconstrue this memory into something that's actually positive, that's something that can really boost satisfaction over time. So that's what I mean by misperceiving the past. Foregoing tempting alternatives is exactly what it sounds like. Like, everybody has alternatives. There's, other people, if you were to turn on your charms, other people would probably find you attractive, even as you're in this committed relationship with, your partner. Foregoing those tempting alternatives will actually make people, the individual who forewent the tempting alternatives, more satisfied with their relationship and more committed to their relationship. Making charitable attributions, assuming the best of your partner, assuming that they didn't mean to say that clumsy thing that they said that kind of hurt your feelings, but that they're still on your team. They still want the best for you, right? That they don't mean to do these things wrong, that they're not doing it just to bug you. These kinds of things, you can tell I've been married a long time. I know like all the explanations, making those kind of charitable attributions, being willing to sacrifice. Like, sometimes it's in, the couple or the family's best interest to sacrifice for one person's career over the other, or to move, or to make these sacrifices. Now, should you be the only one sacrificing? No, that's called agape love, and that is not healthy for you. But being willing to sacrifice sometimes, knowing that in the long run it's going to come back, or it's going to be beneficial, and that it's going to, all be equitable in the end. That's what I mean by being willing to sacrifice. And then being willing to ignore occasional misbehaviors. Sometimes we all perform worse than we should. And if we're always being the judge and saying, you do this wrong, you do that wrong, you don't do that, you didn't think about me. If we're so busy doing that, the other person ultimately ends up feeling unloved, and then they start to get defensive. And then we have this whole, four horses of the apocalypse situation going on, as John Gottman calls it. Being able to ignore occasional misbehaviors. There was an interview of a couple who had been married like 80 years or some just enormous amount of time. And the interviewer said, how'd you stay married so long? And they said, convenient amnesia. It's like, sometimes just let it go. Not every fight is worth having. And so being able to ignore occasional misbehaviors, and notice I said misbehaviors. I didn't say, disloyalty or infidelity or something like that. Just occasional misbehaviors, being late and not calling, these kinds of things. Sometimes let it go. That boosts satisfaction in a committed relationship. All right. Well, that concludes our chapter on attraction and intimacy. And so I will see you guys in chapter 12 next.